Hey there, today I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about my latest roster that I have been having a lot of fun with, and to probably no one's surprise, it's a build around leadership ability that leans into synergies that also tend to be really strong. My name is Nate, and welcome to the Gamers Guild. Alright. It's Hydra time, and very specifically Baron Strucker's Hydra. Red Skull does also make an appearance, but just as a really good in-affiliation 5 threat. And surely they'll get along and won't be any inevitable betrayals within my own roster. Right? Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to start by just breaking down the characters I have chosen, then the tactics, and finally the crisis cards with a smattering of playstyle choices explained throughout the different parts of the video as they become relevant. Before we dive in, though, I do quickly want to mention that all of my rosters are always a work in progress. And I would encourage for all of the rosters you make to keep a similar mindset. Sure, once it comes time for an event, you need to lock in a list, and you probably want the version of your list that has performed the best or most consistently for you, but when you're getting in games at the LGS or elsewhere just kind of freely playing, I highly encourage you to be swapping out characters and tactic cards to find new potential combos and synergies, or just to weed out things that don't work. I mean, this roster, even though it's pretty new, has already spelled out a few characters like Baron Mordo and Mr. Sinister after a few games with them because they didn't end up working out as well as I had hoped. Alright, let's dive in. Starting with the primary leader of these guys who never quite seems to achieve world domination. Baron Strucker has going for him that he is a 3-threat leader who really enjoys healing himself. Like, he has 3 different ways to do it on his card alone. The big one that I want to point out is his leadership that a lot of this roster revolves around. It has 2 parts to it. The first is that if you have a status condition on your character, and that character damages an enemy character with an attack, you can transfer 1 status condition from that character to the opposing character, as long as they aren't already afflicted with the same status condition. So if Strucker and his target are both already bleeding, you can't move the bleed over. This can only happen, though, once per turn. Thankfully, most all status conditions that happen from attacks are after the attack is resolved, which is the same timing as Strucker's leadership, so you can choose to resolve the leadership passing over a bad incinerate before resolving the trigger to incinerate the target off of your attack. The second part of the leadership says once per turn, when an enemy gains a special condition, the allied character that caused the effect may remove 1 damage from themselves. So whether you are passing along a status condition with the first part of the leadership, or you just have an attack or superpower that gives a status condition out, this will heal you back up. Now, obviously, Strucker brings the leadership to the team, which is fine, but he also brings a source of free rerolls for himself and buddies within range 2, and on his own is a pretty deadly character with arrogance and the ability to incinerate enemies from afar. So there's the 3 threat that comes in every single game, but who else sees the table? First is the other Baron, Zemo specifically, because apparently there are more in this game than I would have expected at this point. If you don't know why Zemo is in this list as an affiliated member, I would recommend putting Zemo on the table soon. Jokes aside, he gives out bleed pretty easily, is extremely mobile, offers rerolls to allies, and again is an affiliation. Zemo is a piece that used to be splashed a lot, and deservedly so. And him being in affiliation, so yeah, we're going to use him a lot. Next up is Hydra's hype man, Arnim Zola. I will say that he hasn't hit the table for me every single time, because I don't use him if Mutant Madman pops up, but every other time, and I mean every single other time, Zola is on the board. And there are a lot of reasons to love him, especially alongside Strucker. A range 4 gainer that has 3 super relevant status conditions it gives out, and bleed just in case. His range 4 rerolls for all of his allied buddies, and his tactic card that makes a 3 threat with healing factor way too hard to kill. One of the biggest things that I've loved doing is seeing an attack that I know is going to force through some damage and has a skull in it. Zola can use Hydra engineering to both help force through damage, but also give your buddy a bleed that they can then immediately pass on, which heals the character making the attack and gives the defender another annoying thing to deal with. When on Mutant Madman, however, Zola gets subbed out for Winter Soldier. He isn't technically affiliated despite having a superpower called Hydra Tactics, but that's not something I'm bitter about. Maybe. Bucky, however, is nasty with a reroll, as I have learned with my time from Shadowlands Daredevil. And between the two Barons, Bucky can usually find a reroll to be really good with, and that alone is really nice. As a bonus though, Bucky can heal out of activation if he manages to hand out a bleed condition after an allied character gets dazed with his Got Your Back ability, which is also kinda neat. But he doesn't always hit the table because I have a lot of characters that can hand out the bleed condition, but if he is needed, he's also a very reliable 4th affiliation member if I need him at higher point totals to help keep the affiliation. The last 2 affiliated members I have in my roster are Red Skull, Master of Hydra, which I already mentioned, and Bob. Red Skull is a little bit out of sync with the rest of this roster because he doesn't do anything with the status condition side of things, which is a bummer, but enemies can still give him a status condition, or Zola can when providing rerolls. However, at the end of the day, this is an attrition list, and Red Skull is going to hit hard consistently. So he doesn't fit into the extra gimmicky part of the list, but he does check 2 boxes off. An affiliation and at a threat total that no one else is at. And he fits into the overall game plan of attrition. Bob, I won't lie, Bob is in here for some fun, but the couple of times he has hit the table, he has made a couple of impacts in the form of consistently getting off 2 rockets in a game. The reason for that consistency is in the objectives I'll talk about here at the end. Bob could be replaced with a more consistent or specific 2 threat like Bullseye or Toad, and I wouldn't necessarily blame you. But there is a bit of fear when Bob has his rocket, and rightfully so. 9 dice with 2 guaranteed damage to everybody nearby, and there are plenty of ways in the roster to give the man rerolls. It's very much so a 2-trick pony, but when your 2-threat one-shots a 4-threat and then deals some collateral damage, it's a pretty good day. The remaining 4 spots I have left open for splashing a couple of 4s and a couple of 3s. The first are the 3s, Hood and X-23. Hood hasn't seen the table much for me, but Mystic Rapidfire is really good, as I know from my days in the Shadowlands Daredevil, because you also get that nice little reroll bonus. But there's always the neat synergy of being able to give an ally a bleed, being more of an upside than a downside, as he heals allies and, then gives them bleed as the consequence. Oh, and he also shocks people. He checks all of the boxes off that I want to have, and especially I do try to bring him when I know my opponent is bringing a character with a mystic weakness that I want to exploit. The Splash 3 that sees the table a lot more consistently is X-23, who is basically a more killy version of Zemo. Zemo, to his credit, is more mobile and maybe more consistent with the rerolls, but I had a turn where X-23, who was incinerated, wasn't able to get rid of the incinerate because she just killed or dazed the people she attacked and wasn't able to pass off that status condition. One of those like, oh no, I rolled too well moments, but having healing factor to pretty consistently heal for 3 damage during her activation thanks to leadership can really make your opponent feel like they're just banging their head against a wall, not to mention that in combination with exceptional healing, the card that I'll talk about here in a little bit, she's just extremely durable. Then at the 4 threats, I have Crimson Dynamo and Omega Red, and one of these 2 might get dropped sooner than later. Omega Red is a lot of fun in this affiliation, and equally as trolly as X-23 with his ability to heal 3 times during his own activation, not to mention healing off of enemy characters, ending their activation too close to him. Really, he is just a durable body in general, and if combined with a Baron reroll, he can become a beacon of durability, but never seemingly of damage output. He does have some really nice control as well that shouldn't be pushed aside, But however, he is the one I am looking at dropping though, because Crimson Dynamo has blown me away with how strong he is in this particular roster. Crimson Dynamo really wishes he had more power on turn 1, but turn 2 his power problems are solved for the rest of the game because he can beam even just one person and then have 2 power to place himself within range 2 of where he currently is, and then probably beam 2 other people. And out of those 3 attacks, you are likely to shock at least one person, if not 2 of the 3, which both reduces what your opponent's output looks like, as well as heals his pretty tanky stats. But that isn't what makes them shine. Disruption Field can make your opponent reroll 2 of their attack dice for 2 power after they have done all of their own self-modifying. On a team that in its 3 core members offer multiple self-rerolls on defense already, being able to additionally modify your opponent's dice can be soul-crushing. Sure, dice are dice at the end of the day, but let's say Baron Strucker has 2 life left, and my opponent rolls up with a 7-die attack and hits 6 successes. Strucker rolls 4 dice and only has 1 natural block. After his rerolls his own dice and Zola helps reroll 2 more, we get a total of 3 blocks. Crimson Dynamo then forces the attacker to reroll 2 of those dice, and they both come up as blanks. Strucker then gets to live on 1 health, and then use his spender to heal back up to full. If you were thinking that that is way too specific for me to just kind of like make up, it's because it's something that happened, and better yet, it was Venom who used Lethal Protector, so many snacks, and we are Venom to try and interrupt Strucker's turn. Strucker ended up dazing Venom on that crackback with the world is mine, and again, healed him back to full health. So let's speak a little bit to this team's attrition style. Because at the end of the day, attrition is keeping more of your stuff on the table than your opponent does. This Hydra list doesn't have giant dice pools that come out swinging, Bob being a little bit of the exception. Rather, it has several normal dice pools that have some consistency on them. So the secret that isn't too secret to this team's success is their staying power against 95% of the teams out there. Because if any characters get damaged but live to have an activation, they're probably going to get to heal a bit while also leaving some scars and conditions on their way down. This is ensured by some of the tactic cards and crisis cards that follow through on this idea, so let's get into the tactics. First of all, let's talk about the restricted cards. I'm bringing Sacrifice and Brace for Impact. Both of these are, you'll notice, reactive cards that try to keep your characters alive. Sacrifice specifically because making my opponent daze or KO a character that is already activated can be really handy to ensure I get an important activation out of the other character. On the other hand, I can shift an attack onto a beat-up character who hasn't gone yet in order to also try to get priority. The final nice synergy here is this comboed with, spoiler alert, exceptional healing. It allows X-23 and Strucker to become an unkillable bodyguard in several situations that can really mess with your opponent's plans. Brace for Impact is just a really relevant card, being able to shrug off an incoming terrain throw or stop Dynamo from damaging some buddies if he gets tossed around. From here, though, we have a few affiliated character-specific cards. I already mentioned Exceptional Healing, which costs 3 power and will reduce 1 source of damage down to 1. Being able to protect an important activation out of 23, or just saving the boss from a big attack is well worth the tactic card slot every single game, and is an auto-lock alongside Sacrifice for this list. We then have 4 different affiliated cards, one of which is admittedly very much so in the testing phase. The 3 locks are Scientific Method, Inevitable Betrayal, and the High Council. Scientific Method is crazy good on either X-23 or Strucker, since they can heal back the 2 damage on the turn you play the card. And then they are just harder to kill, and if you put it on Strucker, he gains a new attack that is just really gross in combination with his arrogant superpower. If Zola is on the table, this card comes with him, so it's a pretty firm lock in itself. Inevitable Betrayal cost a lot of power, But since I run some power-giving objectives and a high-scoring secure, it's one that I really like to have because when it comes online, it not only takes away an opponent's objective and their point, but it also then gives it to me, which is a 2 or 4 point victory swing depending on where it is played. This isn't one that sees the table every time, but when there are some cosmic cubes being passed around, Strucker can make really good use of it. And then there is High Council. If you complete its 4 side quests, you get an unactivated 4-threat character in the middle of a round. Zola needs to be on a secure point, pretty easy to uphold. Red Skull needs 6 power, and he can have that as early as turn 2 and still throw some serious punches. Strucker needs to poison 2 nearby enemies, and he has a superpower that literally does that. And Baron Zemo needs to daze or KO somebody. And it's Baron Zemo. So all of these objectives are pretty easy to check off. So if the right point total lines up to have all 4 of these characters in the game, this card gets brought in for 2 reasons. The first is that it can force my opponent to make suboptimal choices to have them play around this card, and just forces more decision points onto them. 2, as long as you don't force yourself into trying to play this card, it literally is just a game changer. Being able to go from 17 threat to 21 is huge. Again, don't go down the rabbit hole trying to check off all of the boxes, but if all these circumstances line up except for one that you can achieve in an activation, go for it. Usually the last one to go for will be Strucker poisoning 2 people, or Skull getting the last bit of power he needs to fulfill his obligation. The one other affiliated card that is getting added for now at least is World Domination. Last week I covered this card and was not aware at the time that it's going to be getting a pretty serious errata. They are removing the word control and replacing it with securing. This means that it can be played on both contesting-based secures as well as the flip objectives. Now, to be the one securing an objective, you have to have more healthy characters contesting that point than your opponent, and in case it is no healthy characters, whoever has the most injured characters there. So you can't just turn 1, throw a body on every point, and play this card 95% of the time. This is a change I have only just recently learned about, so I feel like this card definitely deserves a second look, because if you manage to get 2 victory points off of a card, and not to mention 4 power, it's certainly worth bringing as well. And when I said 95% of the time you can't just score this outright, that's because if you have priority on an objective like Mayor Fisk or Terrigen Mist, thanks to Red Skull and his grunts, you can score that as early as turn 1. Now, I'm not sure if using this card round 1 to score 1 victory point and lose out on Skull's ability to attack someone with 6 dice counting blanks is necessarily worth it, but who knows? I'm excited to start testing it out some more, and we'll probably speak to it at a later point in time. This does leave me, though, with 3 additional spots for some of the more generically helpful tactic cards. The first of these for me is pretty much always Mission Objective. It is a great one to always have in the pocket in case you are on a single extract objective, and it opens up some nice control on those style objectives. Then I have another oldie but a goodie with Trip Up. It's a good one to bring if you're expecting to deal with some of those nasty 6+ threat characters that don't go down so easily. In addition to being able to force through the stun and stagger, it'll also allow you to heal back a damage because it has been determined that the character is the source of the effect of a team tactic card. What's also kind of neat, since both of the characters are the one playing the card, you can heal either of the 2 that play it, not just the one who's performing the attack. Then finally, I have Fallback. It isn't able to outright negate an attack from happening, but it can prevent a double tap, and in a list that is focused on its durability and healing capabilities, getting to live and have an extra activation is a pretty big deal. Not to mention, again, those times where there is a single extract, and them getting out of dodge is all the better for it. This one, though, hasn't seen a lot of play for me because of all of the fun affiliated options. And finally, we get to the Crisis cards. The secures are the easy ones to pick out. I'm running Infinity Formula, Extremis Consoles, and Mayor Fisk. This is a team that can burn through power quickly and effectively, so Infinity Formula feels like a great starting point and splits the battlefield in half, which works into our game plan because the less my opponent can focus fire down models, the better. Under a similar idea, we have Extremist consoles. This one splits up the fight nicely and gives us another source of healing so that the healing can just continue to flow, even better for the team. And some Hydra Troopers holding down a back point for the crew is also really nice to have, more firepower forward than what most other teams can muster. Then Mayor Fisk is nice because of a split battlefield again, but also when we win the points and get stunned, we can pass off those stuns with minimal effect to our own team, unlike Terrigen Mists, which will immediately impact the team's power generation. With that in mind, I have thought about secures like Terrigen Mists and Demons Downtown, but I think they do more harm than good. Again, the poison on us has an immediate downside, and a higher threat means more models and more damage, which this team isn't necessarily a fan of. The same goes for demons, where I won't be able to push away all of the incinerates before that we get attacked, and we really don't want to be in a focused center fight. So I'm pretty happy with the secure selections. The extracts are where things get a little bit more dicey and complicated. The only one I am a huge fan of, oddly enough, is Cosmic Cubes. This is an objective I normally try and avoid, either because my team is already power efficient and I don't want to give that power efficiency to my enemies, or because I don't want to deal with the damage that can stack up from the cubes. And well, for the same reason as Infinity Formula, this team does like power, and this is one of the few teams that can very effectively mitigate the damage that cubes cause with Baron Strucker's leadership. One of the problems with Strucker's leadership is typically a very effective way to play the game is to target down one character and daze them and then follow up with a KO on them instead of spreading damage around, which means oftentimes a character won't get the chance to use Strucker's leadership at all. So having ways of dealing a small bit of damage to ourselves for a payoff actually works out, since we can heal back that small amount of damage over the course of the game consistently. So what about the other two extracts? I have personally gone with the Senator and Montesi formula. I had hammers in there for a while because a team with this many rerolls does well with hammers, but it also goes against the idea of a tanky team, giving your opponent more dice. It just doesn't really jive that well. Senator is there at 14 threat, and while there aren't any grand designs to steal away the Senator, 14 is the perfect threat to bring the 4 models needed for the High Council tactic card. And a 2-point extract slows down the game enough to make sure having 18 threat to your opponent's 14 will swing the game your way. Montesi is kind of just like a safe pick because I really don't like the other options. Spider Infected can effectively stagger Zola, Omega Red, and Crimson Dynamo. We don't like being clumped up, so Research Station is out. And I only like Senators as a single extract because it comes with a really low threat total that my team can take advantage of. Which leaves the only other option as Deadly Legacy Virus, which gets rid of status conditions, which we like to have put on the other team. So that doesn't do good either. Really though, the extracts are a bit of a toss-up. Test out hammers and other things and see what you like and flavor it to your own taste, and let me know what you like down in the comments. And that is my Baron Strucker status condition attrition Hydra list. I will say, if you want, you can very easily pivot into a Red Skull, spend a bunch of power style kind of thing, and that's also where Bob can really begin to pop off on an objective like Infinity Formula. Him getting 3 power a turn, not to mention his pistol attacks, lets him just pop off really nicely. Here at the end of the video, though, I want to go ahead and give a shout out to the guild sponsor, Tritex Games and War Room Hobbies, which are both local gaming stores that host their own game nights, events, and the like, as well as offering MCP miniatures at a nice discount. If you shop from them, use the code TritexGGCB5 at checkout when shopping with Tritex to save an extra 5% off, and the code MCP2022 will get you an extra 10% off of your order from War Room. So if you want to get your hands on the new Robot Overlords coming out later this month, or just get your World War II's lineup set and are shopping online anyways, consider using these stores and discounts to help out an LGS. However, if you are already shopping from your LGS, do that. That's awesome. Keep supporting them and that community. But if you're still wanting a way to support the Guild's videos or podcast, check out our Patreon page. It isn't anything too crazy, but it gives you access to the Guild Discord page and helps us continue to work on new projects. So thank you to all the members of the Guild Hall who are supporting what we do here. Before I forget, we do have a monthly giveaway thanks to Tritex. All you need to do to enter is be subscribed to the channel and leave a comment on a video the same month that video was released. Typically that giveaway would be done now, but I'm actually currently out of town by the time that this goes live and I'm not able to do the drawing when I normally would, so it's just going to be pushed back to next week. As always though, if you have enjoyed my thoughts and are new to the channel, hit the subscribe button for a weekly dose, or double dose, of MCP content in the form of reviews, battle reports, and other MCP goodness. As well, you can also find the Gamer Guild podcast, which goes live on Tuesdays on several different podcast apps and platforms. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, keep on gaming.